March 15th, 44 BC. Inside the Senate House of Rome, 60 men hide iron daggers beneath their crisp white togas. Within minutes, 23 bloody stab wounds would end the life of Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in the ancient world. The conspirators raised their bloody blades in triumph, shouting that they had liberated Rome from a tyrant. But their violent gamble didn't save the Roman Republic, it triggered its ultimate collapse. To understand why Caesar was murdered, we have to look back 60 years into a society crumbling under its own ambition. Born into an aristocratic yet impoverished family in 100 BC, young Julius Caesar learned early that Rome only respected two things: wealth and military glory. At age 25, while sailing the Mediterranean, Caesar was captured by ruthless Cilician pirates who demanded 20 talents of silver for his release. Caesar laughed in their faces, claiming he was worth at least 50, and boldly warned his captors that he would return to crucify every single one of them. The pirates thought it was a joke, but the moment his ransom was paid, Caesar raised a private navy and fulfilled his deadly promise. Caesar returned to Rome with a terrifying reputation. But to conquer Roman politics, he needed massive funding and powerful political allies. In 60 BC, he orchestrated a secret alliance with Crassus, Rome's wealthiest tycoon, and Pompey the Great, its most celebrated general, forming the first triumvirate. With their backing, Caesar secured the governorship of Gaul, taking command of 4 Roman legions to launch a war of conquest in modern-day France. For 9 grueling years, Caesar campaigned across freezing forests and uncharted lands, marching all the way to the mystery island of Britain. At the legendary siege of Alesia, Caesar engineered a stroke of military genius, building 2 giant concentric walls to besiege a hilltop city while simultaneously defending his rear from a relief army. Starved into submission, the fierce Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix surrendered, laying his weapons at Caesar's feet. Gaul was conquered. Caesar had amassed unfathomable wealth and forged a veteran army fanatically loyal to him rather than to Rome. Terrified by his growing authority, the conservative ruling elite in the Senate turned to Pompey, convincing him to break his alliance with Caesar. In 49 BC, the Senate issued a formal ultimatum: Caesar must disband his legions and return to Rome as a defenseless private citizen. Caesar faced a fatal choice: surrender and face immediate prosecution by his political enemies, or commit high treason by marching his army on Rome. On a freezing night on January 10th, Caesar stood on the banks of the Rubicon, the shallow river marking the border of legal military command. Hesitating for only a moment, he uttered the legendary phrase, "Alia iacta est," the die is cast. He spurred his horse across the icy waters. The line was crossed, and the Roman civil war had officially begun. Expecting a slow campaign, the Senate was paralyzed when Caesar advanced with terrifying speed, prompting Pompey and most senators to panic and flee to Greece. Caesar marched into an empty Rome without shedding a single drop of blood, immediately seizing the state treasury inside the Temple of Saturn. Chasing Pompey across the Adriatic Sea, Caesar suffered near catastrophic setbacks at Dyrrhachium, isolated and low on supplies. But at the decisive Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, Caesar's battle-hardened veterans routed Pompey's vastly superior army through tactical brilliance. Pompey fled to Egypt seeking protection from the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII, but the treacherous Egyptian court assassinated Pompey on the beach to curry Caesar's favor. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he wept, horrified by the dishonorable end of his ancient rival and former friend. While in Egypt, Caesar met the brilliant 21-year-old Queen Cleopatra, who famously smuggled herself into his quarters rolled inside a carpet. Caesar aligned with Cleopatra, securing her royal throne while anchoring Rome's access to Egypt's vast grain reserves, moving swiftly to crush remaining rebellions in Asia Minor. Caesar won the Battle of Zela so fast he summarized it in just 3 words: Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. By 45 BC, all opposition was erased. Caesar returned to Rome in unimaginable splendor, celebrating for massive triumphal parades. Rather than executing his rivals, Caesar pardoned them and began reforming Rome, overhauling tax laws, distributing land to veterans, and introducing the 365-day Julian calendar. Among those he pardoned was Marcus Junius Brutus, a noble senator whom Caesar treated almost like a son. But despite his clemency, Caesar's total monopoly on power deeply offended traditional patricians who saw the republic's democratic pillars being dismantled. For 5 centuries, Rome's identity rested on a single sacred value: No single man should ever rule as a king. The breaking point came in February 44 BC, when the Senate officially declared Caesar dictator in perpetuo, dictator for life. Days later, at the Lupercalia festival, Mark Antony publicly attempted to place a royal crown on Caesar's head 3 times. Caesar refused the crown every time. But suspicious senators believed the whole spectacle was a rehearsed stunt to gauge public approval for a monarchy. Senator Gaius Cassius, a hardened veteran who deeply detested Caesar, began quietly assembling a network of conspirators. Cassius knew their conspiracy needed moral legitimacy, so he targeted Brutus, a descendant of the hero who had expelled Rome's last king in 509 BC. Torn between his personal affection for Caesar and his duty to preserve Roman liberty, Brutus ultimately chose the Republic. Over 60 senators joined the plot, agreeing that Caesar had to be assassinated before he departed on a massive war campaign to Parthia on March 18th. Strange omens began to surface across the city. A street soothsayer famously warned Caesar directly to beware the Ides of March. On the night of March 14th, Caesar's wife Calpurnia suffered terrifying nightmares of their home collapsing and Caesar dying in her arms. Shaken by her grief, Caesar decided he would stay home and cancel the Senate session, but conspirator Decimus Brutus arrived at Caesar's residence, mocking his superstition and convincing him that canceling the meeting would insult the Senate. As Caesar rode toward the Senate, an informant handed him a scroll exposing the assassination plot, but Caesar lumped it with ordinary petitions and never opened it. Caesar stepped into the hall of Pompey's theater, completely unaware that his personal Spanish bodyguard had been dismissed days prior. Outside the chamber doors, conspirator Trebonius intentionally engaged Mark Antony, Caesar's fierce protector, in conversation to keep him away. As Caesar took his seat, Senator Tullius Cimber stepped forward with a fake petition, suddenly grabbing Caesar's toga and pulling it off his shoulders. Caesar shouted, "Why, this is violence!" Just as Ceruleus Casca lunged forward, striking the first blow near Caesar's neck. Within seconds, the trap closed. Dozens of senators drew hidden daggers, swarming Caesar in a chaotic, bloody frenzy. Caesar fought back fiercely until he turned and saw Marcus Brutus step forward with his blade drawn. Realizing the ultimate betrayal, Caesar pulled his purple toga over his face, collapsed against the base of Pompey's statue, and stopped fighting. The conspirators fled into the streets waving blood-stained daggers, shouting that Rome was finally free once again. But instead of celebrating, the shocked Roman public locked their doors in horror, terrified of what would happen next. Days later, at Caesar's funeral, Mark Antony delivered an impassioned speech, unveiling Caesar's blood-soaked toga and igniting massive riots against the assassins. Brutus and Cassius fled Rome, but their plot failed completely, sparking 13 years of civil war that ended with Caesar's adopted son, Augustus, becoming Rome's first emperor. The 23 stab wounds delivered on the Ides of March were intended to save a republic, but instead, they ended it forever.